Hey, what's that, 9-4?
Yeah.
Almost 6,000 U.S. teens leave home every year and never make it back, and nearly 400,000 sustain injuries as a result of automobile accidents. We'll discuss the reasons for these massive occurrences, the most common laws that are broken which contribute to these losses, and the reality of the consequences for breaking those laws. The police, the court system, and the medical community all have a role when these accidents occur, but the victims are the ones that suffer the most when irresponsible drivers get behind the wheel of a car. As a high school freshman, Jessica Kiley was one of those victims. Because a driver ignored the rules of the road, her life was changed forever.
My car crash was it was on a typical night. It was kind of like a study buddy. I was always, doing homework. I was always doing this. And I went with my two neighbors up to a soccer club in St. Charles called Veta Soccer Club. And we were just driving around, listening to all the music, singing along to the embarrassing songs, and we were struck from behind. And as I remember, vaguely some of the things, I felt my entire body just jolt forward, and just everything around me just got quiet, and all I could hear was just screaming and glass breaking, and I didn't know what had happened. And I sat in the car for a while and unbuckled my seatbelt, and I thought, what the heck just happened? I got out of the car and I looked down into the ditch, and I saw a car had flipped over, and then I saw a man pinned underneath it. And from where I was standing looking down, I thought that the man had been decapitated because it was just blood everywhere, and he wasn't moving. So I walked down into the ditch, not even knowing that I had all kinds of injuries and mental problems that would result from all of this. But I walked down into the ditch, and I looked at him, and I held his hand, and I told him that he was going to be okay. At age 15, I could go down there and say, "You're going to be okay." And I didn't even know if I was going to be okay. I didn't know if I would make it through the night. I didn't know if my problems were more serious than I had thought. But I sat there and I prayed and I told him. And after the ambulances came and everything, they put me into an ambulance and they took me to the hospital. That's when my body started to kind of let go, and I started to feel every injury that I had. And I sat in that hospital bed, and the doctor told me, you're going to have a fractured ankle, you have a fractured back. I had just bruising on my forehead. I got really bad headaches. I had horrible dreams and just all kinds of stuff. And as a result of all my injuries, I had 2 surgeries on my ankle. One was to correct a piece of bone that had actually broken off in my ankle, and it had fused itself to another part in my ankle. So they had to go in and take that off, put a bunch of screws in to hold it together. And then I had my second surgery this past March. But they told me that because of this horrendous crime and because of someone's lack of responsibility, that my life was changed. And I told them that couldn't be. I was a 4.0 student. I was in every club possible. I was the all-American high school student. And I was told that you will never play soccer again. You may never walk again. I was told that I'm different and I'm no longer the girl that I used to be. All because one person decided to have a little too much fun and couldn't take the responsibility to put down that beer, put down that last shot. I'm a different person today because of it.
According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, automobile accidents are the leading cause of deaths for U.S. teenagers. Officer Andrew Harmon of the Accident Reconstruction Team for the City of Florissant explains the importance of obeying the traffic laws.
It reduces the risk of you being involved in a crash. Secondly, if you are involved in a crash, it greatly reduces the chance that you're going to be injured within that crash. There are also several monetary risks that go along with violating traffic laws. For one, insurance costs go when you are convicted of a traffic violation. Secondly, there are several legal costs involved. One, paying the court fines and costs. Secondly, attorney's fees if needed. Third, driver's school, traffic schools. If you're also away from school or work, that's time lost. You have points assessed to your driver's license. Those points will ultimately lead to suspension if you accrue too many points within a certain time period.
It's important to note that accidents are not the only risk for injury when driving at a high rate of speed. Dr. Mike Clevens, emergency room physician for St. Luke's Hospital in St. Louis, explains.
Anything that's in the car become a missile, potential missile, and that's going at the same rate of speed that you were going at in your accident. So the book that's sitting next to you, you were going at 60 miles an hour in the car. You were traveling 60 miles an hour in the car. The book is traveling 60 miles in the car. If that car stops, that book is still traveling 60 miles per hour. If a person, for example, has an open container, that's a glass bottle or most likely a glass bottle, and that could be flying through the car. The patient can suffer an injury such as a laceration.
Seatbelts are probably one of the most important tools that automakers provide in the car, yet it's unfortunately very underutilized. There are 3 collisions within every wreck, and that is your initial crash with your car versus another car, a building, a tree, a pole, what have you. Then your next thing is your body's going to continue the momentum of going forward in the direction of your vehicle. People may say that airbags they're not worried about their seatbelts because of the airbags. Well, on some of the cars, your airbags are not going to work if your seatbelt's not on you.
I don't know if anyone has experienced an airbag deployment, but it's a violent explosion. It's not anything pillowy, it's not soft, there's nothing fun about an airbag going off. What happens if you're not wearing a seatbelt and the airbag deploys and you have a passenger over there is the passenger will, in a front-end crash, the passenger will go forward, his head will usually get caught between the airbag and the windshield, and you saw what the airbag breaks the windshield without anything being there. So if your head's in between that airbag and the windshield, the airbag is going to drive your head through that windshield.
First of all, seatbelts are very, very important, and I want to emphasize that seatbelts are very important, and everybody should have a seatbelt at all times. Airbags will possibly lessen the impact of or severity of the injury. However, airbags will not be enough. Airbags alone will not protect you from injury whatsoever. In fact, they can actually increase your chance of injury through that being that if an airbag is deployed and the patient comes forward, they can have a neck injury. And that's the reason for the seatbelt, is to restrain the body from moving forward in the crash. The body moving forward throughout the car, hitting the windshield or hitting other aspects of the car, the airbags might help you, might lessen the severity of the injury, but they will not protect you.
According to the CDC, the presence of teen passengers increased the risk of accidents. Insurance agent Ron Schmidt explains.
I believe that the biggest thing is when a youthful operator starts driving is that they're not aware of reactionary time, of how quickly an incident can happen. They're in a car with a couple friends and they're not paying the proper attention they need to, and that's when most of the kids get into trouble real quick. To wear your seatbelt at all times is very, very important because it will save your life and somebody else's.
Statistics show that teens are more likely than older drivers to speed and follow too closely. Officers Andrew Harmon and Jeff Peters of the Florissant Police Department explain perception reaction time.
Speeding in residential areas is a major concern also, isn't it?
It is. And the reason for that is I don't think people realize just how fast things happen in a car wreck. As an example, crashes, people talk about speed in miles per hour, and that's fine if you're on the interstate and you're talking about how long does it take to go from St. Louis to Chicago. But when we're talking about a car accident or a car crash, we're talking about things happening in not miles and not hours, but we're talking about things happening in feet, matter of feet, and in a matter of seconds or fractions of a second.
They call it perception reaction time, and that's the time from when you first see the threat to that message gets from your eyes to your brain. Your brain makes the decision and goes from your brain to the brake pedal, says stop that car. Under optimal conditions in daylight hours, it's usually about 1.5 seconds. Now say you're driving along at 40 miles per hour with 2 car lengths in between you and the car in front of you gets into an accident. If you're talking on your cell phone or adjusting your radio or talking to your passenger, instead of that 1.5 seconds, more likely your perception reaction time is going to be about 3 seconds. That equals out to about 180 feet if you're traveling at 140 miles per hour. if you have 2 car lengths in between you, which is about 40 feet, you're going to hit that car in front of you. That's one of the major things we want to avoid, because that's one thing that we see a lot is rear-end collisions. Our chain reaction accidents, because people are talking with their passenger, eating, or talking on their cell phone.
It seems like today's youth are so occupied with their cell phone and text messaging and turning on the radio and, you know, chatting with friends. And I don't think they understand that, hey, you're 18, your life could end on this day if you don't pay attention.
25 mile an hour, you're going about 36 feet per second. A car length, an average car length, is about 20 feet. So we're talking about at 25 miles an hour, you've got a car length and a half to perceive and react to whatever danger there is there. If you increase that speed to just 30 miles an hour and increase to 5 more miles an hour, now you've given yourself about 10 feet less to react to whatever danger it might be. Why that's important in a residential area is because things that normally don't happen on major arterial roads can and do happen in residential areas. Example is someone that walks between 2 cars that you can't see them. They step out in front of you in a traffic lane. That 10 extra feet might make the difference between injuring somebody or killing the person, or it may make the difference of not even hitting them.
I was actually a passenger in the back seat. It was my neighbor who was driving, and then it was her friend in the passenger seat, front seat, and I was behind the driver's seat. And we were struck in the rear, so that's why I carry the brunt of the injuries. I believe the other 2 just suffered a minor whiplash, but still it's an injury that shouldn't have happened.
Many drivers don't realize that the center lane is only for making left turns. Officer Jeff Peters elaborates.
That middle lane, which is designated by yellow lines on either side of that lane, is a left turn only lane. You are allowed to use that lane for up to 300 feet before executing that turn. If you use that lane to go further than 300 feet, it's a violation. If you use that lane to merge into traffic, it's a violation. Anything other than using that turn lane for making a left turn is a violation.
According to insurance.com, people under the age of 24 are the most expensive to insure.
All insurance companies have different rate structures for youthful operators, starting at age 16 up to age 21, or married or single. Most companies now, I believe, start going down in rate from 16 to 17, 17 to 18, depending on how clean your record is. If you become uninsurable with any company in the state of Missouri, you can always find insurance, but the cost can be astronomical. The insurance companies, when we do underwriting, we find from the state of your activity, which assess points. And you have so many points for violations, 1, 2, 3 points per violation, depending on what style of violation that is. And then if you have a suspension because of points, the insurance company is notified, as well as a DWI, the insurance company is notified. And therefore, this is what starts the process of insurability, whether you can maintain insurance at a reasonable rate or you are not insurable any longer. Any young person who's looking at a vehicle, your higher priced cars theoretically are your Pontiac Firebirds, your Chevy Camaros, your Vettes, any of the high performance style cars. No matter if they have a V6 in them or not, they're going to get the higher rate because of the rating group that the insurance companies put those type of vehicles in.
According to the Community Alcohol Information Program, 42% of all fatal alcohol-related crashes are caused by people 16 to 24 years old, even though they only make up 20% of the licensed population. Prosecutor Deann Outlaw and defense attorney Travis Noble explained the consequences of driving while intoxicated.
For a first DWI, your first time you're charged with that, it's my job to make the case and to establish that you in fact were drinking and driving. And if I do make the case, then you have a conviction on your record which can be used for many years ahead to affect any possible job you might seek, your driver's license again, or just your normal day-to-day as you go about your life. And if you're convicted of a first DWI you will lose your license for a period of 30 days and completely can't drive a car at all. So you'd have to have mom and dad pick you up and take you wherever you want to go. And if you're caught while you're driving while you're not supposed to be, then you've got a whole other set of issues with your driving while suspended or driving while revoked. And after those first 30 days, then you get a restricted driving privilege, which you've probably heard called a hardship license, where it's very restrictive, as the name lets you know. It's driving to and from school, to and from work, and after that, after you pay money, which is going to affect your pocketbook, you can get your driver's license back if you carry an SR-22, which is your insurance. You pay a reinstatement fee. You go to SATOP. Then you can drive your car.
If you are convicted on a first offense, then you carry that with you forever on your record. And if you go to apply for jobs, things of that nature down the road, potential employers are going to look at that and think, do I really want this person driving a car in association with my business? And it can be very difficult to get a job.
Even if you just work for the summer, and it doesn't have to be a job where you drive, where you have to have your driver's license suspended and need to get your license back. It's any job. If you work just for some construction, you know, just an employer would look at your judgment and say, boy, this kid, you know, drank and got behind the wheel. I don't think I can trust his judgment or her judgment, and I'm not going to hire her.
In terms of what all the costs may entail for DWI, we talked before about a first offense potentially costing you $3,000 to $5,000, and that including the lawyer's fees, the court costs, the recoupment to pay back the police department for their time, the substance abuse traffic offender program, the victim impact panel. All of those things require a fee. There's nothing that you're going to be required to do or that you're going to have to do throughout this process that you're not going to have to pay money. And so they're requiring you to pay for all of these services. And so if it's a second offense DWI, for example, then you're probably maybe around the same, close to that range. I can tell you most lawyers who handle DWI cases seriously as their primary source of business in terms of their expertise are going to be much more expensive in terms of costing you anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 just for attorney's fees potentially for a second offense DWI. On a third offense DWI, it's a felony, and that's not without any accident. You're just pulled over, you're arrested for DWI, and you have 2 priors on your record. It could run you up to around $10,000 for a lawyer in that type of case. Many of the cases that I handle are felony DWIs, third or more. If it's more than 3, I'll give you an example, 4, 5, or 6, I generally start with a $15,000 retainer up front before I ever step foot in a courtroom. If it's a DWI and there's an accident and somebody's seriously injured, even if it's a first offense, then the fees can be as high as $35,000. If it's a DWI and somebody's killed and you're charged with either manslaughter or murder second, then the fee could be as much as $50,000. Now again, those are usually your higher end in terms of fees. But if you're going to hire somebody who's competent and knows what they're doing and handling these types of cases and dealing with these types of issues, it's going to cost you that much money. And you really need to be careful with those types of cases because they're serious offenses.
And as a prosecutor, I can tell you, I don't care what it does to your family. I don't care what it does to your job. I care about you drinking and deciding to drive and get behind the wheel and jeopardize the other citizens and the other families that are around. And if you don't do your SATOP, or you don't complete your victim impact panel, or you don't complete the community service that a judge may impose, or pay your fines, that's your burden. That's not our burden, and we don't want to hear the reasons you didn't do it. It needs to be done, and you made those choices the choice to drink and drive, and the burden's now on you to get your things done. And if you're in jail and locked up because you didn't pay your fines, and the judge holds you till the next court date, in jail, that might be 3 or 4 days, it might be 2 weeks, and you lose your job, that's not the city's responsibility, that's your responsibility. And you can't say, but judge, but prosecutor, you know, I'll lose my job. Well, that's a choice you made once again by not fulfilling the conditions of your probation. If you're on probation and you haven't done what's been agreed to do. Younger people don't realize when they're pulled over for driving while revoked, they're arrested in Florissant. And I mean, that's just standard course normally. and driving while intoxicated, you're obviously arrested. But you go to jail, you're booked. You go through the whole process, and you're handcuffed, and you're put in the cell with I don't know whoever else might be visiting our jail that night. And a lot of kids just can't believe that they're put in jail and they're handcuffed. And you are, you know. And the girls can cry, and you know. And
sometimes the boys cry too.
The boys cry too, you know. And once again, the police officer's mind, my mind, you've made that choice to drink and drive. And you may not think you belong in jail, that you could sit out on the hallway and you'll sit and you'll be good and wait till your mom or dad pick you up, or your friend. It's not going to happen.
I think the one compelling thing that I always hear when clients come in, people come in, is that they just never thought it would happen to them. It's a first or second offense DWI, and there's an accident, heaven forbid somebody's killed. You're charged with manslaughter. If you have the 2 prior DWIs, predicates, and you get a third DWI, you're driving while intoxicated, and you're involved in an accident, somebody dies, you're no longer charged with manslaughter. You're then charged with what they call murder in the second degree, because it's now felony murder. What that means is you have the 2 prior DWIs, you're driving intoxicated, so you're committing a felony of driving while intoxicated, and somebody dies in the commission of that felony, it's now felony murder, murder in the second degree. And that has a range of punishment up to life.
According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, alcohol-related crashes kill someone every 31 minutes and injure someone every 2 minutes. Dr. Clevens explains the medical consequences of drinking and driving.
I think there's a little bit easier access to alcohol than there used to be. Kids are able to get it from a variety of sources, via their friends, even their parents, from the internet. There's a network of things around them that they can easily access alcohol and drugs. So I'd say it's about the same. And unfortunately, it's too much. The usual injuries, unfortunately, are large lacerations, fractures, and spinal cord trauma. You know, lacerations to the face. This is a pretty 16-year-old girl who comes into the emergency department, has her whole life in front of them, and they've suddenly been thrust through the windshield of their car, and now she has severe lacerations to her face that's going to scar her for the rest of her life. She had a chance to go to prom, and she would have been beautiful at prom, and now she has these horribly disfiguring scars. It's one thing people don't realize, is that these things last with you for the rest of your life. These scars, these are things that are going to be right in front of your face. It's not a hidden injury. So we see a lot of facial lacerations, broken bones to the face. The most unusual injury I think I've ever seen would be that a person had a road sign go directly through their chest. They were barreling along down the highway, and they hit a sign, and the sign impacted them and went right through their chest, center of their chest. He had no chance of survival. He was immediately dead right on scene. That was his life right there and then ended. The temporary costs of a laceration or a fracture, that's pretty temporary. That can take 6 weeks to heal. The disfiguring scars that we talked about earlier, those will last with you a lifetime. Spinal cord trauma, however, certainly will last with you a lifetime, not only in the cost of your everyday existence, but there's a monetary and social cost to it. It's about $2 to $3 million of a lifetime cost for a patient who has paralysis from their neck down. So every activity that person does is dependent upon somebody else. If you have to go out of the house, there's a wheelchair involved. Sometimes it requires a ventilator. If you think about Christopher Reeve and the accident that he had, he was totally dependent upon somebody else for just about everything. That cost was staggering to his family, to society. He lived a very productive life. However, the costs are just monumental.
The person that hit Jessica was also responsible for a lifetime of monumental cost.
This wasn't, her first time, I believe. And I know the man that had been in her car was not decapitated, but he was really messed up. I believe he's still in the hospital today, almost 4 years later, trying to recoup and everything. And the sad thing is that this was one of her good friends that she had injured. She had hurt someone so bad that was her best friend, who you're supposed to care for the most and watch out for, but she was belligerently drunk, and she lost that responsibility.
First of all, the call at 2 o'clock in the morning is a call that no doctor wants to make, and no parent wants to receive. So from that aspect, just even starting out after I've done my job and whether or not the patient is able to survive or not, I got to make that call to that parent and say, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, can you come to the emergency department? You know, I can't tell them over the phone what's going on, and rushing through their mind are a myriad of possibilities. So that's the worst thing that I have to do, is make that phone call initially. And then when they come here, if somebody is horribly injured and may not survive, I have to tell that parent that, you know, your son or daughter is not going to make it tonight. We've done everything that we can, and this is your chance to say goodbye. Unfortunately, a lot of parents don't have that chance. Their child is already dead by the time that they've come to me, and they'll never have the chance to hold that child's hand again or say goodbye because it's already too late. You have to. I've had parents who've hugged me. I've had parents who've openly wept. I've had parents who've thrown things. It's a horrible thing, and then you have to. And then the rest of the family needs to come to the emergency department. It's a very sterile environment. It's not a good place to tell your child goodbye.
Every day, hundreds of thousands of careless teenagers take to the American roadways. And as a result, these youthful drivers suffer nearly 5,000 deaths and 400,000 non-fatal injuries every year. Most of these tragic accidents can be avoided by becoming a conscientious driver and following the rules of the road. The question now is, what will you decide?